Welcome to Automation Unscripted, an educational, frank, and fun podcast dedicated to the art of business process automation. Automation Unscripted is brought to you by Virtual Operations, a leading consultancy in digital transformation, with more than a decade's experience working with organizations to help them grow their return on investment in automation. In this edition, Daniel Andrews and Kieran Gilmurray delve deeper into the realm of artificial intelligence, including how to get started with AI, how to choose the right tools for your needs, and common pitfalls to avoid when implementing AI in your organization.
Welcome back to Automation Unscripted. Today we're going to be digging a little deeper into AI and some of the pitfalls and watchouts surrounding the space. Last week we discussed AI and how it can be utilized alongside RPA. And today we're going to be looking at potential issues or blockers with AI and the impacts that they might have. So Kieran, let me start here, and I won't go straight into the pitfalls. And for our listeners, if you're just looking to get started with AI, let's say I'm familiar with RPA, I have 5 to 10 processes, I'm hearing all the buzz around AI. Where would you start?
I would recommend this methodology regardless of the technology, Dan, which is the usual think big, start small, and scale fast. And when I say think big, like RPA or any other great technology, AI is in that category of greatness. And remember, you need a digital toolkit to allow you to do all the things that humans can do, the thinking, the actioning, the decisioning, the seeing, the speaking, the listening, the interpreting. You need all this technology to make a business really function. Then I want to find that first entry point of a project that's interesting enough to do, absolutely aligned to the strategy of the business. It's going to impress people, but it's not going to be so big that nobody's going to see the benefits for 24 months' time. So what could you do? And there's so many door openers now with AI, it's absolutely phenomenal. So for example, I could put in conversational AI that's generative AI infused. I can put that into my production environment in 6 weeks. I have AI coming into a customer support center, answering questions in an intelligent way and taking some of the pressure out of the call center or widening out the numbers of hours that are being answered. I could put in OCR with AI. You and I call that IDP, Intelligent Document Processing. So if I have invoicing coming in through emails, I can use RPA to open up the email, download the attachment. I can use IDP, OCR with AI, to strip the data out of the actual body of that particular invoice, purchase order, whatever it might be, credit note. Let the RPA move it across the business into your ERP, your finance systems, your customer relation management systems. And again, I've got more benefit that's not necessarily complex. If I want to go bigger, then I'm looking at retention models, segmentation, analytics, and a whole host of other things. But getting started isn't difficult. The tooling's known, it works, and a whole lot of use cases exist to get value in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I like that. Think big, start small. You mentioned their time frame of 6 weeks. So I think a lot of people still have the perception that these type of AI tools take years, right? Months to get in place. You referenced 6 weeks there. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, if you think about how long projects actually take, why they take forever. Well, back in the day, it was partly because nobody knew what they were doing. There was a lot of learning and experimentation. But like RPA or intelligent automation or AI, the rules of the game are pretty much known. You know the hotspots inside a business where it can make an impact. You know, for example, conversational AI, absolutely put that in front of your contact center. But when you think about it internally, to a degree, your HR center is a contact center because there's lots of queries coming in. Your operations room, your IT room, all these places, your finance team, all get asked the same sequence of questions all the time that don't take someone, you know, with decades of experience to answer. They can be automated, digitized, and everything else. So back in the day, projects took forever because nobody knew what they were doing. They were making mistakes. Now, it really is a question of hunger. If I go back to the horrible old days of COVID, what we learned there is if you wanted to make change happen and you wanted to make it happen quickly, you just threw enough people at the project because it's important. Why do I say 6 weeks now? if it's important enough, you can make it happen in a very short period of time. You don't have to do week 1, work out what we're going to do. Week 20, why don't we begin? All these things can be delivered in a very short period of time. And like lots of them, great RPA packages, great intelligent automation packages, great models are already built in. So you're not necessarily building these things from scratch. There's pre-built templates, so they'll come to people like virtual operations who've already got an AP process or a procure-to-pay process pretty much written as a template, and then you're just plugging in the uniques and getting going really quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, even in real-world experience, just for me personally, you mentioned chatbots or call bots. I mean, my cold calls have probably gone up by 2 to 3 times now, just on my personal phone. But now with actually bots that fool me for the first maybe 10, 20 seconds, or I genuinely think I'm speaking to someone, and then there's a couple nuances in there where I realize, wait, hang on, I don't think this is a person.
How did you find out? Well, isn't it fascinating though? The doubts in your head, and we're very much only at stage 1. Can you imagine when we get to VASA, not 1 as it was released yesterday by Microsoft, but imagine when we get to version 50. Can you imagine ChatGPT version 56? And that ain't going to be that far away. So I see, literally digital twins off of ourselves with really intelligent working outs happening. And anytime people ring into a contact center, call center, something, it'll look like you or I actually talking to very much humanize it. But then the temptation, and they are already there, outbound sales agents making cold calls to see how interested you are in things to do that first discovery piece. It's as exciting as it is frightening, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, I think you're terrifying me and probably definitely terrifying the audience. So I think I set that one up. All right, so let's look then back at, you talked about the different types of areas where we can implement AI. Let's take chatbot, for example. How would I, as a organization, then go about choosing the right tool? Have you done it in your experience?
Yeah, look, that's the tricky bit, just that first piece to work out. There are, at last count, someone told me, and I'll have to take their belief for this, about 300 and something chatbots. But you have to be careful what you're describing here, because back in the day, unless something was coded in a specific way, and unless you asked that question in a specific way, things were difficult. What you then got was companies put AI into the chatbots. So now all of a sudden the chatbot could work with nuances and you got a much better answer. Now you're talking about putting large language models, in other words, generative AI in behind the chatbot, and then feeding that chatbot all of the data inside of your organization, and then moving that chatbot technology as a single interface layer on top of all of the applications inside of your business. So now you can use your voice, now you can use typing, or you can put images at it. In other words, a multimodal system, and I can interact with that any day of the week. So when you say, look, what are the things I want? Well, now I want my chatbot of generative AI in place because I want it as human as possible. I want my chatbot to be able to sit on top of multiple other applications inside of the organization and use RPA, iPaaS, APIs, whatever it is, to connect all those things together, because I don't necessarily, Dan, want to have to log into 57 different applications every single day. I want the application to come out of the box with great analytics because I want the insights. I want to come out with templates because I don't want to have to start coding from scratch. I want a system that doesn't just work in a contact center per se, but I want it to work in finance and operations and every other area. Because once I invest in technology now, I don't want point solutions. I want to put in a solution that I'm going to exploit and get as much value out of as I humanly can. So once I've done all that, then I want to be able to embed that application potentially inside of applications so I can intelligently ask questions in lots of places. And if I want, you might extend it a little bit further. It's not just about securely, and the security end of that is absolutely key. Securely answering my finance and my HR questions, because it's got, integrated Active Directory where the permissions that I've got only allow me to do the things that I want. So I don't want to be sitting in the contact center looking at the chief executive salary because it's been configured badly. I want that. And I want it to be able to go on-prem in case I'm an organization that absolutely has to be locked down. If I'm the Bank of England, I'm not going on to ChatGPT and opening it up to the world. So I wanted to be able to go on premise, and then also I might want to be able to go in cloud, but I want to go into secure cloud. So, I want it in GPC, I want it in Azure. All those things are tick boxes. But notice I'm talking about the technology first. And I'm doing that for a little bit of fun, because the real lesson, Dan, is what's the business challenge you're trying to solve? Now, when I understand that for this year, next year, and the year after, what are the technologies that are out there in the market that absolutely follow that ambition, fuel that ambition, and enable that ambition? And then I have a lot of tick boxes, and some of them I've mentioned, multilingual. I want 57 different languages. I want analytics, of course. I want it to come out of the box with code in it. I want it to be easy to use by technical people in the business and what I would describe as citizen developers, and. Curate the list that best delivers your strategy, go out to market, narrow that down, then try using 3 or 4 applications in the wild, in the real world, and see how you get on over 6-8 weeks, and then pick your winning horse when the winner comes out of that particular race as well.
Yeah, two things you talked about there really is capability, right, and security. Capability, obviously, you need a tool to be able to do everything you want and more. You don't just want to have this siloed tool for a single purpose. But then security, which I really want to come on a little bit more. You mentioned there, the first thing you said was giving the application or the generative AI tool access to all your data. That, for most organizations, most people, should terrify you. Just that sentence alone, right? So what can you do, and what do you watch out for to help mitigate that? So let's say I'm individual A looking to implement Gen AI at a huge scale within my organization. I can't just go with, hey, here's the tool. What are the things I need to make sure I have covered to ensure I can answer those questions that will immediately come firing at me?
Yeah, look, so I always laugh at that question in some ways. What folks forget is your IT person who knows and has all the keys to the kingdom is that individual who you should be terrified of in your business. But in all seriousness, look, so let's talk about some of the risks and some of the security features that are associated with generative AI and AI in general. So it takes huge quantities of data. That data has to be fed in by lots of systems. And if I want an intelligent answer out of my finance system, I'm going to have to give it a lot of data. But in the real world, we don't give everybody in the finance team and every customer and every supplier undiluted access to our system. So one of the things we need is permissions and roles and good security governance built around the things that you can access versus I can access versus the chief financial officer can access. She may have a different need entirely than you and I if we're sitting in the contact center. So just because we're putting or giving the conversational layer access to everything, because we want everyone to use it, it doesn't mean we're just gifting the keys of the kingdom. So that's layer one, security permissions, role-based access, all still important. The other bit then comes into, look, you have to be really careful about building a system that doesn't introduce bias, doesn't introduce risk, doesn't expose your data to third parties. So therefore we're into firewalls and everything else, and into putting it onto secure online systems, doesn't put the data into open corpus. So in other words, if you don't choose the right platform, then the data that you feed into your conversational agent, if you go with a cloud-based service, for example, ChatGPT, and go with the very public one, then that data can make it into the public, something you never want to do. So that's data risk and data security sitting in there as well. The other bit is just the usual, I want to make sure that the data that I put in is non-biased. I want to make sure the code that I'm building in the background and the flows don't allow people to hack across the system. So good penetration testing, all those things, the basics that we now take for granted, they still apply to this same piece of software because that's what it is. And then beyond that, I want to make sure, I'm following, legal jurisdiction rights. So if I'm in the EU, then I'm not really going to put a system in the US and allow client data to come across. And then classically with generative AI, remember how those systems are coded is that they're designed to always come up with an answer. So I need to make sure there's a good old human in the loop checking the inputs and the outputs of those systems, because I don't want it hallucinating. In other words, manufacturing a very plausible answer to an internal staff member, customer, supplier, that could put them at a lot of risk or disadvantage as well. So it's not one thing, it's lots of things. That's not overwhelming because all those things you pretty much do in most IT projects today, or should be.
Yeah, and you mentioned it there, hallucinating. There were two things we'd spoken about a couple of weeks ago, and they were hallucinating and shadow AI. You've explained hallucinating. Can we go into shadow AI a little bit and why that's a risk? Because you've talked about, right, at an organizational level, the things you can do when you've said, hey, we're looking to move forward with this tool. We can implement X, Y, and Z, this access, that, and that's great, right? But let's go on to shadow AI a little bit as well, because that, for me, is also a major risk that might be a little harder to control.
It might be. Well, let me do hallucinations first because it falls into shadow AI because that's a big risk in that area. It's a big risk in general. So as I said, the generative models or the large language models are designed to always come up with an answer. So instead of the computer saying no, which frustrated people, they come up with what looks like a plausible answer. Let me give you an example. In the US, not that long ago, there was a couple of lawyers went to court. I believe they were protecting an airline as a client. And they presented case law, as you do in legal jurisdictions, to argue their case, saying due to these 5 or 6 bits of case law, we believe that whoever it was suing the airline, their case should be thrown out. Lo and behold, Dan, that went into ChatGPT and asked for an answer. It manufactured what looked like real law precedents, but they were literally manufactured, made up. That's an hallucination. The technology wants to give you an answer, even to the extent where it'll create the answer for you that looks plausible, but bet your bottom dollar that case got thrown out, those lawyers got fined, and actually those lawyers got sacked from their own organization. So you still have to check the answers that you're being given by the AI. And I love that because one of my biggest fears in life is we hand the keys of the kingdom to the AI and we don't question it. And time again, we've seen employment bias, we've seen scoring mechanisms that discriminate against particularly qualified, really good people. You just can't yet, and probably never should, give the keys of the kingdom away. So that's the first thing. Now, don't let that put you off AI, he says, having put you off AI. AI is so useful, and if I use ChatGPT every day, I use Claude, I use Gemini, I use Grammarly with AI in it to change my grammar and make my sentences better. I use Canva to design better things. Midjourney to design graphics. The number of tools that I use every day that are allowing me to be minimum 40% more productive, 30-something% better quality output, 30, 40, 50% sometimes more innovative, because I go to ChatGPT, can you give me 10 ideas for this particular away day? It'll do it in about 30 seconds. If I go to a group of humans, it'll probably take about a day. So it allows me to be far better. Now I'm excited by the technology and I want it. And what I've got is an IT team saying, well, no, you can't use it yet because we're terrified that if you put the wrong information into the system, it will appear in public. And you're sort of going, no, that couldn't be true. Trust me, that's true. Samsung a while ago copied their IP into ChatGPT. Lo and behold, they didn't realize the security implications and quality IP appeared. There's people typing in medical conditions into ChatGPT. There was a bug in that system a little while ago, or a method where you could actually see what someone else had written. So there's risks. The problem there is that the draconian teams have closed the door. They've pulled up the drawbridge and don't do it. But everybody's so used to getting and using this technology for next to nothing, free or $20 a month, and seeing the benefits that they're still going, well, do you know something? I'm not going to tell the IT team that I'm using it, but darn, I will. And you're sort of going, well, does that really happen? Well, shadow IT has happened for ages. I know one government organization who was writing letters to ministers, filling in job applications, writing disciplinary letters, putting in CVs and everything else into ChatGPT, not realizing the security implications. And of course, the IT team banned the lot, but horse had bolted. What I'm recommending is, look, you want to have a sensible, grown-up conversation with your IT population. As ever, you start at the top and you educate the board and the executive team and every leader and every manager and everyone right from the top, the bottom, the left and the right in the organization about the strengths and weaknesses of these tools and about the risks, rewards and benefits. And once you have that sensible conversation, you start to use these tools right away, ChatGPT, Claude, Bing, Bard, to be more creative, to be more productive. But the type of information you feed into these systems you wouldn't worry if it made it out to the real world. The type of information like your private banking details, your medical history, company IP, you definitely don't want appearing in the real world in a public generative model, and therefore you just need to be a lot more careful. Sensible IT plays out. Closing doors will encourage shadow IT to happen if you're not going to have a grown-up conversation with people.
Yeah, and that's where it differs a little bit from RPA, right? A lot of processes that are implemented in, say, the RPA world, you're not so concerned about the data because the bot really only will do what you tell it to. You did say there as well, when you talk about not giving it access to certain data, what if you had to? Like, you have a process where you really, the value is exponential and you want to use Gen AI, but you need, say, some secure data to be accessed. So how would you tackle that if the juice was worth the squeeze from that process value?
Oh, I love that phrase. Yeah, look, so there's various iterations of large language models or generative AI backends. So you've got your very public ones, ChatGPT public. This instance, you wouldn't go near that. You have got what I describe as the middle place. So the first one is, I call it taker, take general applications online, SaaS-based, use them in your stuff. You've then got the maker, which is the bit in the middle where you've got secure platforms like Amazon Bedrock, some of the Google side of things, Microsoft Azure in the middle there. And that means you can actually use those public large language models, very powerful, really well maintained. You can put your data up there and your data remains private to you. So it doesn't get mixed in with anybody else's. If you want to be really, really, really secure, then what you can do is build your own LLM in your own data center in your own country. And therefore, that data, as long as you draw the drawbridges, the firewalls, the permissions, the user access controls, and everything else, as long as you close that off from the outside world, then you can guarantee even greater depths of security. So it really depends, Dan, on how much security you want. You would do access-based controls in any of those anyway. But if you want it to be ultra secure, ultra private, because the juice is worth the squeeze, but the risk isn't, then consider building a large language model within your own server room and then lock it down as much as you need to only relevant people, and then put all the usual firewalls, antivirus, malware, and everything else, and education around that large language model so that you do get the benefits and none of the risks.
Yeah, so you shouldn't be completely deterred. You've just got a couple more hoops to jump through if you deem it worthwhile doing.
100%. The total blocking, which I've seen in lots of organizations, even though there's lots of juice to be squeezed at every level, is really irritating and scary. It's back to the bad old days of IT. I get why they're doing it. But as you say, look, you take your circumstances, you look at the risk, and you build your IT and AI systems accordingly and lock them down suitably. Then you get the innovation, the productivity, and the creativity, whilst making sure that you protect your IP and particularly your staff and your customer data as well.
On that note, I think it's a good place to end. Quickly summarize what we went through today: getting started with AI, choosing the correct tools, how to choose them, why to choose them, and how AI can be a dangerous game if you haven't prepared yourself. Until next week, see you soon.
See you, everyone.